Alors, bon, je vois qu'on est quand même pas mal nombreux. On est 17 personnes à peu près, ce qui est beaucoup plus que ce que j'aurais espéré. Mais enfin, disons qu'ils vont tous venir. On va se donner quelques secondes d'attente parce qu'on est marocain et qu'on commence à l'heure orientale. Mais j'aimerais bien avoir Jackie Hassan, pardon, Lionel Pérez sur le truc. Lionel, bonsoir.
Salut Charles, ça va bien?
Ça va et toi? Est-ce que tu m'entends? Moi, je te vois pas.
Oui, je t'entends très bien et je te vois.
Très bien. Alors, parfait. Moi, je te vois pas, mais c'est pas grave. Alors, voilà comment on va procéder. Je vais introduire le président de la congrégation qui va vous saluer et vous remercier. Je reprends le micro et je vais vous parler et je vais vous présenter, toi et Michael. Alors, et je vais introduire le sujet concernant l'antisémitisme actuellement et où nous en sommes. Alors, ce que je voudrais faire, c'est également faire en sorte qu'on soit très précis. Il y a en tout et pour tout, il ne faut pas dépasser les 45 minutes, sinon les gens vont nous quitter. D'accord?
C'est beau.
Les règles du jeu sont bonnes. Bon, alors, Ralph, on commence tout de suite là.
C'est beau.
Tu
Alors,
branches, tu te mets en vision.
j'y suis.
Très bien. Madame, Monsieur, bonsoir. Votre présentateur, si je puis dire, de la soirée, Charles Barchechat, est heureux de vous recevoir ici sur un sujet assez intéressant et d'actualité. Et avant de commencer, je vais laisser la parole au président de la congrégation Or Hahayim, M. Ralph Rimok, pour quelques mots.
Alors, bonsoir tout le monde. C'est avec grand plaisir qu'Or Hahayim vous propose encore une fois une conférence sous le thème du Covid-19 et l'antisémitisme, avec la collaboration de la communauté séfarade unifiée du Québec et la participation du B'nai Brith Canada. Or Hahayim a toujours joué un rôle important dans l'organisation de diverses conférences à travers les années. Notre succès est le résultat du travail et de l'expertise de l'ami de tous, Charles Barchechat, qui a toujours su mettre en place des conférences avec des sujets d'actualité. J'aimerais le remercier pour ses efforts et sa contribution continue. J'aimerais aussi reconnaître le travail d'Aaron Minciotti, toujours disponible pour partager ses connaissances technologiques pour la mise en œuvre de cette conférence. Merci aussi au B'nai Brith Canada et son directeur régional pour le Québec, M. Matthew Ross, qui a initié cette conférence et nous a demandé d'y participer. Merci aussi à Lionel Pérez, chef de l'opposition à la Ville de Montréal, à qui je laisserai le soin de présenter notre conférencier, M. Michael Mostyn, président directeur général du B'nai Brith Canada. Je vous souhaite à tous une agréable conférence et profite de l'occasion pour vous souhaiter à tous Shana Tova ou Metuka. Bonne conférence et merci.
Merci Ralph. Madame, Monsieur, bienvenue à cette nouvelle conférence. Alors, c'est que l'antisémitisme est un sujet très d'actualité. On assiste surtout en France à des assassinats, à des vandalisations de cimetières, à des pierres tombales qui deviennent des latrines, et ça repart de plus beau en Europe. Ici, s'il y a des balbutiements d'antisémitisme, on n'est pas encore arrivé à mettre des tags antisémites sur les synagogues. Il y a eu quelques actes, mais qui ont été assez vite réprimés. Et est-ce que le Covid a un lien avec l'antisémitisme? Moi, je pense que oui, mais je ne prendrai pas la responsabilité de vous en parler. Je laisse le soin à notre invité, à notre orateur de ce soir, Michael Mostyn, qui est le président directeur général du B'nai Brith pour le Canada et qui supervise de nombreuses initiatives de programmation et de promotion de l'organisation. Il est le porte-parole principal de la communauté. C'est un défenseur public de ceux dont les droits humains sont menacés. Michael est avocat. Il a été membre officiel de la délégation canadienne en 2007 au groupe de travail international sur l'éducation, le souvenir et la recherche sur l'Holocauste à Prague. Il a reçu la médaille du jubilé de diamant de la reine Elisabeth II en reconnaissance de son service communautaire au Canada. Mais avant de laisser la parole à Michael, j'aimerais vous présenter quelqu'un que j'ai connu en culotte courte, qui est également un avocat, que je connais donc depuis, disons, 45 ans, je ne dis pas, et c'est le chef de l'opposition officielle à l'hôtel de ville de Montréal. C'est mon jeune ami Lionel Pérez qui va nous faire le plaisir de faire la première introduction. Lionel, tu as la parole.
Merci beaucoup, Charles. Effectivement, comme tu dis, on se connaît depuis mon bas âge. Je viens de fêter mes 50 anniversaires cette semaine, donc pas loin probablement de ma Brith. Je pense qu'on se connaît, nos parents se connaissent. C'est honnêtement un privilège et un honneur d'être parmi vous ce soir. Nous savons tous la congrégation Or Hahayim, qui est beaucoup plus qu'une congrégation, c'est une institution phare de la communauté juive séfarade. Ici à Montréal, ses membres sont impliqués non seulement dans leur congrégation, dans leur centre, mais également à travers divers organismes communautaires montréalais et parmi d'autres milieux. Donc vraiment, on parle à des participants, on parle à des bâtisseurs, et c'est un plaisir de pouvoir vous adresser la parole. Comme l'a mentionné Charles, B'nai Brith n'a pas vraiment besoin de beaucoup d'introduction. C'est un organisme, un des plus anciens organismes au Canada, qui est là pour représenter à différents moyens la communauté juive at large, principalement évidemment dans sa lutte contre l'antisémitisme, la défense des droits et libertés pour toute la communauté, mais également pour tout Canadien. La relation entre B'nai Brith et la ville de Montréal, elle est là depuis plusieurs décennies. Effectivement, B'nai Brith a organisé pendant plus de 2 décennies la soirée de commémoration de la Shoah à l'hôtel de ville, sur les escaliers de l'hôtel de ville pendant plus de 20 ans. Au cours des dernières années, ça a été incorporé par le service du protocole, toujours avec la collaboration de B'nai Brith. Et puis, je pense que lorsqu'on parle d'antisémitisme et de la ville de Montréal, il y a quelque chose qui me saute à l'esprit. C'est évidemment, malheureusement, ce qui est arrivé, ça fait 5 ans, à Paris, Charlie Hebdo, hyper cachère. Et ces événements ont été vraiment un précurseur pour développer une autre façon de faire et combattre l'antisémitisme à Montréal. Parce que c'est suite à ces événements-là que le maire d'antan, M. Coder, et moi-même avons établi une table sur l'antisémitisme ici à Montréal en juin 2015. Et c'était effectivement, on a invité les représentants de B'nai Brith de France. Ils sont venus. On a passé une journée ensemble. Évidemment, il y avait les représentants de B'nai Brith Montréal-Québec. Il y avait d'autres membres de la fédération. Et c'est lors de cette discussion, pendant plusieurs heures, où on a eu la chance d'échanger sur les défis particuliers de 2015 à Paris, à Montréal, qu'on a pu développer le besoin d'avoir un module, une unité spécifique au sein du service de police de la ville de Montréal pour s'attaquer aux criminels. Certes, avant cela, il y avait effectivement des agents, des officiers, et le service de police s'attaquait lorsqu'il y avait des criminels. Mais la différenciation, et ce qu'on a pu développer depuis, c'est vraiment une unité spécialisée qui se consacre seulement à cela, à tout crime et incident haineux. Et ça, c'est la nouveauté parce qu'on ne faisait pas avant enquête lorsqu'il y avait des incidents. La distinction, la différence entre incident et crime est importante. Un crime, c'est parce qu'on sait qu'il y a eu violation du code criminel, donc le fardeau de preuve est quand même assez exigeant. Tandis que des incidents, ça peut être du vandalisme, ça peut être à caractère religieux ou autre, mais ça ne va pas nécessairement être enquêté par la police. Alors ça a changé la donne. Et depuis 2016, donc, le SPVM, le service de police de la ville de Montréal, a ce module qu'on appelle module de crimes et incidents haineux. On a pu faire avancer beaucoup ces enjeux-là, non seulement au sein de la communauté juive et l'antisémitisme, mais également pour toute la communauté montréalaise. Donc, ce n'est pas seulement des victimes juives qui ont tiré avantage, mais également toute minorité, tout groupe cible maintenant à sa disposition ce module, cette unité qui se consacre régulièrement sur ces enjeux-là. Et ça fait de nous une des villes au Canada qui est la seule à avoir une telle unité. Ayant travaillé avec le SPVM en coulisses, des fois pour recherche, des fois pour agir comme liaison, on a vraiment un service de police qui est dédié, qui comprend la nature et comprend que lorsqu'il y a des événements qui sont au-delà de nos frontières, ben, ça peut affecter des conséquences et avoir des séquelles inattendues. Et donc, on s'attaque à cela. D'ailleurs, chaque fois, malheureusement, qu'il y a une raison, il y a une présence policière accrue autour des institutions juives ou autres, parce que justement, ça fait partie du mandat du SPVM. Donc, c'est grâce à cette table sur l'antisémitisme 2015 qu'on a pu créer cette unité. C'était avec la participation et la suggestion de B'nai Brith, et on l'a mis en branle immédiatement. À part cela, on a pu créer à Montréal un autre centre, ce qu'on appelle le centre de la prévention sur la radicalisation. Et ça s'attaque évidemment sur un autre angle, avec des groupes ou bien des individus qui ont malheureusement fait face ou bien ils ont été emportés par une certaine radicalisation et ils travaillent en concert avec le service de police. Le mandat est un peu différent, c'est vraiment avoir une connaissance des différentes communautés, des différents quartiers, avoir des lignes ouvertes avec des personnes qui pensent que peut-être il y a un membre de leur famille ou bien de leur communauté qui a été radicalisé. Et donc, c'est un autre outil. C'était vraiment, la ville de Montréal était la première ville à avoir un tel centre. Et elle a fait enquête et études auprès de l'ONU comme un modèle à suivre à cet égard-là. Donc, nous, on a des particularités. Nous savons que, évidemment également que lorsqu'il y a des problématiques, c'est vraiment avec le service public, donc le monde municipal qui est impliqué. Il y a des défis, des nouveaux défis que nous faisons face à l'antisémitisme. Celle qui est la plus évidente, c'est évidemment avec tout ce qui se passe en ligne, sur l'Internet, sur le web. C'est quelque chose qui est très difficile à contrôler. C'est pour ça que nous entendons de plus en plus une volonté à ce que les géants du web, que ce soit Facebook, que ce soit Twitter, qui commencent à utiliser et imposer un code de conduite plus exigeant auprès de certains utilisateurs de leur plateforme, parce que justement, ça peut inciter de la haine, ça peut inciter l'antisémitisme. Il y a des pas qui ont été franchis, il y a des efforts qui ont été faits, mais il y a encore beaucoup à faire à cela. C'est quelque chose qui particulièrement aux États-Unis, prend beaucoup d'espace médiatique. Je sais que les autres organismes aux États-Unis, c'est quelque chose qui les préoccupe et ils poussent évidemment les différents gouvernements pour sévir à cet égard-là. Un autre élément sur lequel moi j'avais espéré avoir l'appui de l'administration actuelle, mais malheureusement je ne l'ai pas eu encore, c'était lorsque j'ai demandé à ce que la ville de Montréal puisse adopter de façon formelle la définition internationale de l'antisémitisme, quelque chose qui a été adopté par une trentaine de pays, évidemment par des démocraties en Occident, l'Europe, aux États-Unis, pour des raisons qui m'échappent pleinement. La mairesse et puis son administration ont décidé de ne pas aller de l'avant. Ils ont voulu plutôt étudier la définition. J'ai donc retiré ma motion. J'ai bon espoir et puis je dois vous dire que pour ce projet-là, j'ai travaillé de main en main avec B'nai Brith, avec d'autres organismes communautaires pour justement faire avancer. C'était à ce moment-là que j'ai eu la chance de connaître et de se faire présenter Michael, et j'ai immédiatement apprécié la façon qu'il a traité l'enjeu avec beaucoup de diplomatie, de délicatesse, avec beaucoup de compréhension des enjeux, que ce soit politique, médiatique ou autre. Alors, vraiment, une très belle façon de venir à connaître Michael, et j'aurai quelques autres mots à dire sur lui prochainement. Sur l'enjeu particulier, l'antisémitisme dans l'ère de Covid. Nous savons tous qu'il y a malheureusement, en temps d'hystérie collective, en temps de peur nationale, un risque supplémentaire. Ça veut dire que lorsque on a un ennemi, un soi-disant ennemi qui est la COVID, cette pandémie, ben des fois on veut trouver des boucs émissaires. On veut trouver des individus ou des groupes qui sont la cause de nous tous nos problèmes. Et très souvent, c'est à travers des stéréotypes, des préjugés que différents intervenants puissent aller au-delà et aller très loin et causer des problématiques. Sans rentrer trop dans les détails, il y a eu au début de la pandémie, ici à Montréal, lorsqu'il a été su que ça a été, entre autres, à travers différents visiteurs qui venaient de la communauté juive de New York, à travers des mariages qui avaient respecté les règles du temps. Et on a commencé à entendre comme quoi c'était effectivement un peu la cause, l'origine ici montréalaise. Immédiatement, j'ai contacté le cabinet de la mairesse, on a dénoncé haut et fort cette façon de faire, et c'était la chose à faire, parce que justement, on ne peut pas cibler des individus ou des groupes comme étant la cause. La même chose avec, au début, lorsqu'il y avait certaines attaques avec des institutions, dans mon district même, il y avait un temple hindou qui avait été attaqué. On croit, nous ne le savons certainement pas parce qu'on n'a pas pu trouver ceux qui ont été responsables, mais c'était probablement en lien avec justement la COVID-19. Donc, malheureusement, lorsqu'il y a ce genre d'événement, il y a certains individus, par lâcheté, par peur, par ignorance, qui agissent et font des actes. Et ce qui est important, c'est de s'assurer que ces actes restent justement sur les franges, restent avec des individus. Oui, absolument, il faut qu'il y ait enquête, il faut que les forces de l'ordre agissent. Mais ce qui est plus important à mes yeux d'un point de vue communautaire et sociétal, c'est de nous assurer que ceux qui ont le micro, ils parlent et ils dénoncent pour ne pas laisser répandre ce genre d'attitude, de stéréotypes, de préjugés. C'est ça ce qui est, je pense, le plus dangereux. Et de façon générale, je pense, à quelques exceptions près, c'est ce qui a été fait et continuera à être fait. Évidemment, il faut être vigilant. C'est des choses sur lesquelles on ne peut pas baisser les bras. Il faut continuer en concertation avec les différents acteurs et joueurs communautaires, santé publique, le groupe de cellules à Montréal avec qui on a contact nous-mêmes, les élus. Alors, c'est des choses sur lesquelles on peut mettre à la disposition lorsqu'on nous contacte. Et moi, ce que je dirais, pour conclure, c'est le plus important, c'est effectivement de dénoncer. Lorsqu'on est au courant de certains événements, sur notre rue, dans notre quartier, on ne pense pas nécessairement appeler la police ou faire un rapport. On ne pense pas nécessairement dire, de toute façon, ils ne vont pas les attraper. Au contraire, chaque fois, c'est très important parce que ça va laisser une trace. Et lorsqu'il y a une trace, ça va être important lorsqu'il y a des bilans. Et lorsqu'il y a des bilans, ce sont les décisions qui vont être prises pour le futur basées sur ces données-là. Donc, je pense que je vais donner un petit tour d'horizon de point de vue municipal. Charles a fait une très belle introduction de Michael en tant que PDG de B'nai Brith, quelqu'un qui supervise les différentes unités à travers le pays. beaucoup d'initiatives qui ont été faites suite à sa prise comme PDG. Il est un porte-parole reconnu sur justement l'antisémitisme. Et puis moi, je pense que, comme je l'ai mentionné, ça a été un plaisir de travailler avec lui plus tôt cette année. Et je compte pouvoir travailler avec lui. Et je pense que ce qui est important, c'est de comprendre que B'nai Brith est toujours là pour nous, pour justement défendre nos intérêts. Absolument, on a différents organismes ici et localement, mais je pense que c'est un organisme qui a beaucoup de connaissances, et lorsqu'on a des experts et des personnes avec les connaissances comme Michael, ben c'est un atout qu'on doit utiliser. Alors, hope, Michael, it wasn't too burdensome for you. I know French is not your not your mother tongue. I just very quickly mentioned that it was a pleasure working with you earlier this year. We didn't have a chance to get the result that we wanted on getting the definition of anti-Semitism, the IHRA definition adopted in Montreal, but I look forward to continuing on this and other works to be able to get the kind of result we want. So thank you, and it's a pleasure seeing you virtually tonight. Merci beaucoup à tout le monde.
Merci beaucoup Lionel, et maintenant on va passer à notre conférencier de la soirée, Michael Mostyn, qui lui va s'exprimer en anglais, mais on va lui demander to speak slowly to allow our people to understand, and if they have any question, they will raise their hand and we will ask you the question. Mr. Mostyn, the floor is yours.
The virtual floor. So thank you so much, Charles. Thank you, Ralph. Thank you, Or Hahayim, for partnering with B'nai Brith tonight. I'm very excited to have this first event, and I hope it's the first of many. As B'nai Brith is a organization, the oldest Jewish organization in Canada. We were established in 1875, 1876 in Montreal, when we established our lodge, our first lodge in Montreal. And we're very proud of our history. We're proud of historically what we've accomplished in Montreal in the past. And we are really refocusing ourselves today and dedicated to growing our presence in Montreal, because we know the needs are there for our community. The needs are there at the community level, and also, of course, in fighting against anti-Semitism, because it affects all of us, and not just here and across Canada, but across the globe. This is a growing phenomenon. I'd also like to thank Lionel. It was also a pleasure seeing you virtually tonight. It was a pleasure working with you. We thank you for your political leadership. You are a great example of what a politician in Canada should be. Somebody who cares, somebody who goes the extra mile, somebody who fights for your community. And even though we did, temporarily lose that battle, it's not about the easy battles. It's about doing the right thing. And even if it takes years and years, that's our role, is to have the tenacity to continue fighting to achieve what we need to achieve. And we know we need the IHRA definition in Canada in order to combat anti-Semitism effectively. So thank you, and I as well look forward to continuing to work with you, and of course B'nai Brith in many, many things going forward into the future. I also, I'd be remiss talking about, we've had incredible national presidents out of Montreal for B'nai Brith. Of course, the late and great Jerry Weinstein, Ted Greenfield, and Eric Bissell, former national presidents and leaders of our organization. We have 3 current board members in Montreal: Jerry Tarasovsky, Aaron Reamer, and Morris Vesely. We have incredible staff members. I see some of them are on the call with us tonight: Harvey Levine, Jana Minakovsky, and our newest member of our staff, Matthew Ross, who was in touch with some of you tonight. And they are here to serve you. We are a community organization in the truest sense. We are grassroots. We are never elitists. We are not afraid to roll up our sleeves and make sure that we get the job done. And the only way that we can serve the community is if we know about the challenges, we know what's going on, and then we will always be there to offer support all the way through, and sometimes through the criminal process. And I will get to that in just a moment, but please don't hesitate to ever reach out to any of them or any of the volunteers. And we hope that more of you will join our movement following tonight's call and other things, because it is a growing problem. We do need to stand tall and confront, and we can never turn a blind eye to anti-Semitism, because it does not get better by itself. History has shown us this. We have to have the self-respect to stand up for ourselves, demand equality under the law, and demand that the law apply equally to Jewish civil rights, just as it does to every other minority group in Canada. I also see some of our wonderful CVS committee is here. I noted down, I think, because I don't see faces, but Terry and Ronnie and Joanne and Diane. We have an incredible CVS committee, which does great community work, helping seniors, helping the least fortunate in Montreal. There's a lot of great things, and again, we're growing and expanding. And one of the very exciting projects that we are going to be launching is actually a Sephardic committee. We are going to be developing a Sephardic committee out of B'nai Brith, based out of Montreal. And it's very important for us to bring in the right leadership and members who want to advocate for issues, of course, to concern to the Jewish community, but also more specifically for the Sephardic community. And if anybody is interested, please don't hesitate to contact Matthew Ross out of our Montreal office, because we would love to have your participation. I actually, in 2015, one of the first things I did, I came in 2014 as the new CEO, and now it's been 6 years, so it's not quite new anymore. But one of the first missions we led to Ottawa, and I'm very, very proud of this, was a delegation of Sephardic leaders from across Canada. B'nai Brith organized this in 2015, and it was the first time that a Sephardic Jewish delegation, specifically talking about Sephardic issues, met with the sitting Prime Minister in Canada. That was with Prime Minister Harper in 2015. And we met with several cabinet ministers, we discussed issues, and myself and some others from the community testified about the threat from Iran. Of course, it was a threat to our community back then. The threat has only grown. Today, the Abraham Accords were signed in Washington. We see some movement of warm peace with our Arab neighbors in the Middle East. But Iran and the IRGC, when we're talking about anti-Semitism, it's important not just to think about domestic anti-Semitism, the anti-Semitism from the neo-Nazis, from the far right, from the extreme leftist Israel haters, but also there are real terroristic threats that challenge us, even here in Canada, our brothers and sisters around the world. And we are targeted simply because we are Jews. And B'nai Brith, for the past 2 years since Parliament, both major parties in Parliament, the Liberals and the Conservatives, voted to list the entirety of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard of Iran as a terror organization. We have been unrelenting in pushing against the government. And we have formed alliances, B'nai Brith, with the Iranian diaspora community that are opposed to the Iranian regime, and who in fact are the greatest victims of the Ayatollah, are dissidents, people pushing for women's rights and political equality and freedom in Iran. They're also some of the greatest victims of the regime. We partnered with them. We did a press conference in Ottawa this past winter, demanding that the government follow through with its own votes to list the IRGC. They did not do so. We gave them 30 days notice to do so. And then we launched a lawsuit against the federal government to list the IRGC. And that is an ongoing lawsuit. B'nai Brith is an organization that does an end-to-end solution when it comes to anti-Semitism. This is the concern that it keeps us up at night, and we focus on it day in and day out. From independent research to developing strategic goals, and again, not easy goals, but goals that are necessary for the community. And sometimes they may take years and years to achieve, but if they're worthwhile, we will pursue them. To the media, the press release, which sometimes comes out, the advocacy, the government relations. We have a full-time government relations office in Ottawa. We currently have staffed offices from Alberta all the way across to Quebec. And if necessary, we will use the law, and we have great legal expertise. It's one of the strengths of our organization. And I myself, being a former civil litigator, understand this. And you need to have every tool in the toolbox when confronting anti-Semitism. And we do that, and we do it aggressively. And we will not stop until the IRGC is listed, and there's several other issues that I'd like to get into. So last year, B'nai Brith, in its annual audit of anti-Semitic incidents, the audit that has been produced by the League for Human Rights, which is our advocacy arm. It's, you've probably heard of the Anti-Defamation League in the United States. They do not operate in Canada. We changed the name from the ADL to the League for Human Rights several years ago. We produced the report, B'nai Brith, that's cited by Stats Canada, the US State Department, the Roth Center out of Israel. We compile the numbers on an annual basis through our anti-hate hotline. We help each and every individual that contacts us to combat anti-Semitism, and through police reports that cross the criminal threshold. And we work with victims to ensure that there are criminal consequences when it is criminal. But the audit, which has been produced since 1982, showed last year 2,207 incidents, anti-Semitic incidents in Canada. It's the second year in a row that it crossed the 2,000 threshold in Canada. That's equivalent to about 6 incidents per day. And it's an 8% increase over last year, which was also the highest number on record. So there was a new baseline in Canada. We've established this over the last 10 years. It is consistent with municipal hate crime statistics from police departments across the country, showing that Jews are the most victimized religious minority in Canada on a consistent basis. The media may not be reporting it as such because of it may not meet their narrative all of the time, but it's the reality. We are the most victimized group. And we track according to harassment, vandalism, and violence numbers. The numbers last year, as usual, harassment is typically the highest number. Vandalism comes in second, typically, in violence, thank God, is last. But we had 14 violent incidents in Canada last year. That's 14 too many. 182 acts of vandalism, physical vandalism, and 2011 incidents of harassment. In Quebec, that was a 12% increase in incidents from over 2018 numbers. And it's nearly a 70% increase over 2017. And Quebec actually exceeded Ontario in total incidents, and Ontario, of course, is where the largest Jewish population in Canada seats today. But Quebec exceeded Ontario in total incidents for the second time in a row, with 2018 being the first time that this happened. And there were greater incidents as well as hate online. There was a federal election in the last election, this played into it to a certain degree. You may recall B'nai Brith's advocacy. And again, we're not afraid to pull punches, and speak truth to power, whether it's politicians of any political party that are engaging in it, institutions, venerable institutions, major corporations. We are not afraid to challenge anyone at any time in anti-Semitism. You may recall Hassan Guillet, who was a very high-profile Liberal Party candidate running in a safe seat in the Montreal area last election. It was B'nai Brith's expose that within 4 hours, he lost his candidacy because it was pulled by the Liberal Party because of our independent research. And again, after more than a week went by and the party didn't respond to our demands, we had to go public. and his candidacy was pulled in a safe seat. He otherwise would have been an elected candidate, an elected member of parliament. You know, we want to see individuals that are pushing for rapprochement and good things with the Jewish community, not instigators. But notable incidents from last year: a Hasidic child was sprayed with tar by construction workers in Outremont. Another Hasidic child was rammed with a car while traversing a crosswalk. A Hasidic man was mugged and robbed of his religious articles in Montreal. Another observant Jewish man was physically assaulted by a taxi driver in a well-publicized case. There were 760 incidents of online and in-person harassment, 31 of vandalism, and 5 incidents of violence in Quebec last year. And of course, we report always 1 year behind, because that's when we compile the statistics, as well as receiving them from various police departments across the country. COVID-19, one might not have thought that this would have a negative impact when it comes to our Jewish community, because what do we have to do with any of this? It's a virus that originated in the Wuhan region in China. It's affected every sort of person equally, rich or poor, white or black. Every country in the world is impacted by this. What does this have to do with the Jews? Well, for anti-Semites, it has everything to do with the Jews, because anti-Semitism is rooted in conspiracies, and it's almost like the further it is from the truth and the bigger the lie, sometimes the easier it is for somebody who falls down that rabbit hole to believe and push their anti-Semitic narrative. And it's a cancer that eats away at the soul, and we see that in how aggressively we are targeted. We observed a significant increase in COVID-19 related anti-Semitic posts online very early into this pandemic. Since March of 2019, we've received near daily reports of anti-Semitic harassment, in fact, both online and in person across Canada. And we've seen a significant uptick in anti-Semitic conspiracy theories and statements, in particular around COVID. What we see are theories such as the state of Israel created the virus as a way to infect the planet to benefit their domestic pharmaceutical industry, that the state of Israel is deliberately spreading the virus amongst the Palestinians, that France's Minister of Health, who happens to be a Jew, introduced COVID-19 to maximize profits, again, for the French pharmaceutical companies, and I believe the pharmaceuticals because it's big business, and the Jews, of course, we control all the big business as well as the media, which run negative stories against Israel all of the time. So consistency doesn't play into this. Jews are uniquely disobeying self-isolation and or quarantine regulations and endangering the public. This is something we keep reading about. Comparisons of Jews to disease-spreading rats. This is, of course, a long-standing trope, but we see its resurgence, similar to the medieval bubonic plague. Jews are susceptible to contracting and spreading COVID-19 more than other people. And there has even been instructions by white supremacists online on how to infect Jews with the COVID-19 and encouraging people to do so. So it demonstrates again how chaos and chaotic situations are never good for the Jews, how quickly public health or economic or political crises can become a breeding ground for anti-Semitism and can turn against us as a community. And that's why we need to remain strong and remain diligent against this and push against governments. And B'nai Brith has been there, and we've been pushing, and there's always more to be done. In Quebec, we've had some great examples in the recent past exposing some virulent anti-Semitism. For example, and this it's relatively rare that we get a hate crime convictions or even charges in Canada. It's very difficult. It's a very high burden to meet. But in between March to July of 2017, Montreal police did in fact charge an imam from Quebec with willful promotion of hatred. And this was due to independent B'nai Brith research that we pushed into a Palestinian Jordanian imam named Sheikh Mohammed ibn Musa al-Nasser. And he revealed in his sermons out of his mosque that the Jews were the worst of mankind, that's a quote, and he expressed his hope that Muslims would slaughter them on Judgment Day. We uncovered over a dozen sermons that were delivered by al-Nasser over YouTube, and we filed a complaint with Montreal police. They did issue an arrest warrant. It was issued for willful promotion of hatred under the criminal code. And this was done after he left Canada. He was not a Canadian, he was back in Jordan. 4 months later, by the way, he got hit by a car and he has since passed. So that's that. But there was another imam in Quebec who said even worse things, and he's resident of Quebec, and there's never been any charges laid. Consistency is a big issue and a big problem. We also discovered an anti-Semitic rapper based out of Quebec. He had hit songs. His name was Mad Cole, and his lyrics contained calls for the destruction of Israel. He referred to Jews as parasites and as demons. We succeeded in pulling his songs from major online music platforms. Whenever B'nai Brith is issuing its advocacy, we always set certain goals for ourselves. You know, sometimes we can achieve them, sometimes we can't, but it's always worth the try. If it's criminal, we try and push for criminal sanction. But in this, it was a success because it pushed it off. But again, our research caused the Montreal police to launch a criminal investigation. And that's very important because just as we physically protect our synagogues and our institutions with cameras and we reinforce the doors, at the end of the day, we have to feel the same way about anti-Semitism and its impact on our lives. We cannot wait for it to come in. We have to do everything we can to push it out. When Israel fights its wars, it doesn't fight defensive wars on its own territory because it knows it's going to be destroyed instantly. It's too small. It's too small. And it's the same way within our community. If somebody's inside of our synagogue or they're inside of our home, it's already too late. We have to push it back. And so, you know, ultimately it's about education, working with the community, Holocaust education, etc. But that's not enough because we know anti-Semitism, it's eternal, unfortunately, and education is not enough. There has to be serious consequences against the purveyors of hate. And if individuals know that they're going to be targeting the Jews, they need to know that there are groups like B'nai Brith that are not going to stand for it and are going to go to the wall. And just like anything else, if you're a robber and you're walking down the street, you take a look. You know, if one house has the windows open and another house has steel doors all around, you know, you're going to bypass that house. People need to feel that way about the Jewish community. People need to know that this is a hardened target, that it's going to be too hard on my life if I start picking on the Jews. You know, so if I'm a bully, maybe I'm going to go bully somebody else. And of course, it's our role to then stand with those other marginalized communities and push back and defend them as well. And I'm very proud that B'nai Brith has a strong history of standing with the multicultural community. We've taken a stand on Bill 21 in Quebec and working for the best interests of all Canadians. But we stand up for ourselves. We have respect for ourselves. We're Zionists. We say that's good. I'm a Zionist. We need to reclaim certain language. And we also stand up for everybody else. There's been a resurgence, of course. We know that there's neo-Nazis. It's been in the news in Montreal as well, across Canada. Robert Gosselin, I'm sure many of you have read about that story in the newspaper. Charles Ziegler, B'nai Brith was instrumental in notifying the Montreal police again about that, and there's stories written. He's currently it's currently before the courts, but we have been at the forefront at B'nai Brith of pushing against the resurgence of not just from the extreme left, not just against radical Islam, but against the resurgence from the Nazi and neo-Nazi ideology, which has never, unfortunately, fully gone away. And so we recently exposed Nazi memorials that were built decades ago in Canada. And interestingly enough, it's by, when Canada at the time, our Prime Minister apologized to the Jewish community with respect to the MS St. Louis a few years ago, at a time when none was too many, and so many of our brothers and sisters perished in the Holocaust because Canada wasn't open to Jewish immigration. Many Nazis were allowed into Canada just after World War II. And some of those helped establish monuments in different cities, in Edmonton, in Oakville outside of Toronto, towards units that were aligned with the Waffen-SS. And so we are working at a time when statues are being toppled down, and and figures that are not pure, and that are, there's good and bad with everybody. But statues of former prime ministers are being toppled in Canada. There are Nazi monuments to groups that slaughtered not just the Jews, but Poles and political dissidents. And that's absolutely unacceptable, and we will not stop. And if the law needs to be changed, we're going to work to change the law, because this can't be the example that's set. There's a street in Ajax, Ontario, named after a Nazi warship captain we're working against. And of course, the last Nazi that's in Canada, Helmut Oberlander, we've been through the courts, I believe, 18 times. Most recently, B'nai Brith was up to the Supreme Court of Canada. This man has no right to be in Canada, lied on his citizenship papers, denying that he was involved. He was a translator for the Nazis. And he may be, I think, 95 or 96 years old and in ill health. But in our opinion, his victims never got the chance to live up to 95, 96. It's not over. We're in touch with prosecutors in Germany. We will not rest until he gets deported from Canada. And even if he doesn't end up getting deported from Canada, which would be a tragedy, at least his family understands, and his grandchildren should understand who his grandfather was as well. And so should his community. We also wrote to the Prime Minister, and after a year-long campaign, got a condemnation of a rally in Latvia, which is the only rally in the world which honors members of the SS. And this is in a NATO allied country. So this is a worldwide phenomenon. It's something that we have to be cognizant of, but we cannot ever back away. We cannot be politically correct. Anti-Semitism is anti-Semitism. We call it out and we stand strong. So we have an 8-point plan, which we've put together. And it calls for hate crime units across Canada, a zero tolerance approach to anti-Semitism. We need a national action plan. We've been providing this to government, working with police across the country. So we're not an organization that just complains. Yes, we demand action, but we also provide solutions and try working together in collaboration. So I think I'll end it there. I thank all of you for your attention. It's wonderful seeing so many new faces tonight and meeting all of you. And I hope that this is just the first of many interactions together, because there is so much work we need to do together. And I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody might have, as I'm sure Lionel will as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Do you have any questions, ladies and gentlemen? Will you please raise your hand, and we will give you the mic to ask. Y a-t-il des questions parmi l'auditoire? Alors, c'était une conférence très claire et vous avez tout compris, c'est merveilleux. I have a question for Michael. What's the power of B'nai Brith when we have a case to bring that to the government?
So thank you very much. We have our office based in Ottawa is a full-time dedicated government relations office. So we have a wonderful director of government affairs based in Ottawa. And this is something that we have particular expertise in. And I should say, even myself, after I practiced law for about 7 years or so, My first role with B'nai Brith was government relations director in Ottawa. I lived there for close to 5 years. And it's a strength. We work with every political party. We have, of course, nonpartisan. We are nonpartisan to political parties, but we are very partisan when it comes to issues and pushing respectfully, but tough. And people know, and our philosophy is quite different than many other Jewish groups, because we don't look to make friends in any political party or with any politicians. I don't believe personally that that's how politics works. We are advocates. We are advocates for the community. We respectfully push, but we say this is something that needs to be done. And we have the constituency, and we're fighting for our constituency, and we find the way to achieve that goal. So it's a strength, and if there's any issues, we'd be more than happy to listen to them. And these might be things in the future that we may want to add into our agenda and working together.
Thank you very much. Any question?
Hello.
Yeah, Henri Znati.
Yes, thank you for your your message. Why don't any charges were led to the second imam in Quebec?
Thank you, Henri. That's an excellent question. I do not have the answer to that. One of the challenges that we have, and this is something that we're constantly raising with justice officials across the country, is a lack of transparency in the application of the law, and in our opinion, a lack of consistency when it comes to the laying of hate crime charges. When we see sometimes charges laid in other communities in similar fact situations, and we don't see it taking place in our community, it causes distress, because we must all firmly believe and have faith in the justice system in Canada. And I've mentioned to Crown attorneys and those high-ranking officials many times that we have a very mature community. If our community will understand, if somebody is charged and ultimately they win in court, so be it. But what's not acceptable is not to lay charges in thinking that a community is not grown up enough to handle seeing the court process win or lose. One of our 8-point plan points actually is that demanding that attorney generals publish their guidelines for when they should or should not lay charges. This is opaque. We don't know the answers to this. And so for organizations like ourselves, we need to know these answers. We've exposed several media organizations. We've shut down newspapers and television shows in various languages for those of you. And by the way, anyone that's not following our stuff, don't hesitate to go on email or Facebook or Twitter and follow B'nai Brith. You'll see the very aggressive activity and the trove of activity that's constantly coming up. But sometimes we see that cases like Your Ward News, which was a newspaper, there were criminal charges laid there. We think that we've uncovered far worse media examples that aren't getting charges. So it's a constant challenge, but it's also education to work with officials and inform them. And it's also, again, why we need the IRA definition of anti-Semitism, so that civil servants, those in the justice sector, politicians to understand. And it's important to note too that, and I apologize, that I have to speak in English, but my French isn't quite good enough. But our Montreal staffers have much better French speaking skills than mine, and we do share content in French as well on important issues, certainly that impact Quebec. So important to note that.
Thank you very much. Yes, Doreen.
Yeah, hi. It's not Doreen. My name is Harvey Levine, and I'm the Quebec Regional Director for B'nai Brith, and I've had the pleasure of working with Michael Moston now for the past 6 years. Somebody asked a question on the chat line on campus issues, and I know it wasn't deeply covered because we cover so many issues, but I've had a lot of experience in this area, and I'd like to answer that question of what we do on campus. There are some very, very serious situations that we faced on campus regarding anti-Semitism. particularly sur les campus du McGill, Université de McGill et Concordia, et aussi quelquefois aux Universités de Québec and Université de Montréal, but la plupart sur McGill et Concordia. And one of the problems with both of those campuses is that the actual students' unions are composed of mostly, and they have been for the past number of years, those who are not favorable to Israel, run by pro-Palestinians, definitely anti-Israel, very often anti-Semitic. There's been a lot of issues, and we've been on the forefront of all of those issues. Most recently, in fact, my colleague, Jana Minikovic, who is the coordinator in Quebec for the League for Human Rights, and myself have had hours of meetings with Suzanne Portier and the vice principal at McGill University talking about these issues, talking about the anti-Semitism that we view at the McGill Daily, and the many, many incidents that have come out of the SSMU, including, having students thrown off the body, Jewish students claiming that they were, in support of Israel, etc. So we deal as much as we can, but it's important to remember that all of you are going to have children now or grandchildren in the future going to these universities and attending these universities. And I know Michael shares with me to let you know that we are always at the forefront. We deal with the issues. We have students who report back to us immediately on issues. And of course, we pick up the issues from the McGill Daily and other newspapers, etc. And we deal with them. But I also have to tell you, even pre-university, we get a lot of incidents, and these are some of the incidents that add up to the high number of incidents in Quebec from surprisingly young children. And this is becoming more and more frequent because social media, they pick things up on social media, and these are children who are 10 ans, 11 ans, 12 ans, and they think it's very funny to go and do a video of doing a Heil Hitler and then posting it so that all their friends see it and say something horrible like, the Jews should go back to the ovens. And of course, they're bound to hit a friend who's Jewish or not necessarily Jewish, because we get more and more complaints from non-Jews as well, who are very sensitive to these issues, and they report them into us. And of course, these are young children. We can't name them because they're underage, and we have to deal with these files on a one-on-one basis by immediately informing the school, informing the principal, getting the parents involved, setting up a program so that they understand more about inclusion and diversity, sending them to the Montreal Holocaust Center. Sometimes these programs are very long and drawn out, but they're very, very effective. So that's all I wanted to tell you.
Thank you. Anyone else? So I'm going to wrap up this presentation.
Une question pour moi, s'il vous plaît.
Oui.
Oui. So how is hi everybody? I would like just maybe anyone can elaborate on the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism and the impact on the on our courts, and is it part of our action plan to have more impact with this definition?
Michael?
Sure. So thank you. So bottom line is yes. As an organization, and I know as a broader Jewish community, we would like to see more institutions use the IHRA definition to contextualize anti-Semitism. The House of Commons in Ottawa has passed a resolution, so Canada has recognized it, although it doesn't have, and it was never necessarily meant to have the impact of law, but there is Bill 168, which is currently going to be going into third reading in the province of Ontario. Ontario may be the first province, hopefully, to recognize the IHRA definition. We would love to see this in Quebec and in every province across Canada, because again, how can you fight something if you don't have a proper definition of it? And we know that today the term Zionist can be used rather than the term Jew, and Israel has become the new Jew in the world. We need people to understand that. We need police to understand that, because too often we see incidents that really are criminal in nature, but they have the language that is used can be misunderstood as being purely political, purely dealing with the Israeli-Palestinian issues, when in fact it is targeted language towards Canadian Jews. But this has to be understood. It's very important. It's high up on our agenda, and we will be continuing to push this and also for institutions of higher education. As Harvey had mentioned, it's a big issue facing our students on campus, and universities they really need to adopt IRA, and we will continue pushing them to do so.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Lionel. Tu veux parler, Lionel?
Là-dessus, Charles?
Pardon?
Si je peux rajouter sur cette question de...
Bien sûr, tu as le droit, en tant que chef de position.
I think Michael touched all the important points. The only thing I would add is that it's very important to understand that within, whether it's cities or different provinces and governments, there's a lot of different services, a lot of different ministries. And if they don't use the same definition of anti-Semitism, well, we don't know if they're collecting the same kind of data. We don't know if they're comparing the same kind of incidences. And from a policy-making perspective, it's important to be able to have that data to know that it's on the same definition. So within the city of Montreal, I was mentioning to you before that there's obviously the police, the SPVM, there's the Centre de Prévention de la Radicalisation, there's other services when it comes to fighting hate, there's immigration. So it's very important from our standpoint, from a public policy, and therefore from a collection of data, to be able to make the right decisions going forward. Obviously, there's all the legal aspect as well that we hope, although not legally binding upon the criminal code, hopefully it will come to play a part in coloring the kind of incidences that are reported. And then if that happens, then potentially prosecutors will take that more into account, and then hopefully lay charges where they're necessary.
Quelqu'un d'autre? Alors, merci beaucoup. Merci aux orateurs. Merci Lionel. Thank you, Michael. Merci, Monsieur Rimor, qui nous a permis de faire cette soirée. Et mon dernier conseil avant de partir, c'est restons vigilants. Nous savons qu'il y a une force qui nous défend actuellement. Nous avons cette possibilité d'avancer. Restons unis, restons solidaires et évitons tout drame lié à l'antisémitisme. Bonsoir à tous et merci beaucoup d'avoir participé à cette causerie. Au revoir.